parent of a weird kid, how did you react when you realized that your kid did weird creepy stuff? Not my kid, but my nephew. He's 10 years old and is being taken out of school for homeschooling. He's had major trouble learning and fitting into the classroom in general. The weird kid aspect is this crush that he has on a girl in his class. I hesitate to say crush, because it's full on creepy 10-year-old stalking. His parents have had probably 30 talks with him about moving on and that this girl will not ever see him as anything positive and that he needs to get over it. He has seen 2 different counselors who recommend he be taken out of any situation in which he might be around her, because he's completely obsessed with her. This causes him to have a panic attack, because it's part of his identity. His exact words were, "If I'm not the boy who likes, then I don't even know who I am. That's me. I'm the boy who likes." He isn't allowed to have any type of electronics that can take pictures, because he took his iPod to school and took a bunch of pictures of this girl. His parents are worried about where this will go, so to try and combat it, they have pulled him out of school and he's in serious counseling. He's a sweet kid, but holy frick does he have some major fundamental problems. I babysat the neighbor's kids. When the parents went out, the little boy, around 6, told me I'm going to kill mummy and took me to the top of the stairs where he'd tied string across the banisters at ankle level. I used to tie strings around things to make little trip traps when I was a kid, too, but never at the top of the stairs, and I certainly never did it to kill mummy. I hope you told that kid's parents. I was reading on our porch the other day when I heard my 11-year-old stepson say he was going for a ride around the neighborhood. I said okay without looking up from my book, then saw he glide down our driveway on a Razor scooter in a Grim Reaper robe. He's not creepy weird, just entertaining weird. He also had his sister perform a wedding for him and our dog last year and won't let the joke go that the dog is his wife. Thanks for the concern, but he is not fricking the dog. My son decided he was married to a cat. He called her his cat wife and joked that I would be allergic to his children. About a year later he announced that they were no longer married and he was too young to have gotten married in the first place. I don't know if it's creepy, but my son loves fat bellies. When he was younger he used to hug people and smush his face in their bellies. He always liked our fat friends the best. He's 7 now and still keen. I have to remind him that ladies don't like being told they've got a nice big squishy belly. Or a future chubby chaser. When I was supervising her in the bath she stood up, dropped her washcloth in the water, stood on it to push it under the water and menacingly whispered, "Now think about what you've done." Funny in hindsight, but at the time I was a little concerned that my daughter tried to drown a washcloth. My 3-year-old daughter loves old monster movies. I'm in the habit of putting a movie on while I clean the house. I plugged on King Kong 1933. Next thing I know my daughter is enthralled. She can't stop screaming, "What's that?" A monster, and crying when Kong kills a dinosaur. I asked her 5 times if she wanted me to stop the movie and got an emphatic no. Since then she's gone on to fall in love with Ray Harryhausen films and Godzilla films. She cries her eyes out every time Mothra leaves Earth in Godzilla vs. Mothra, The Battle for Earth. My wife was concerned that a 3-year-old actually enjoys crying and watching movies that make her sad or scared. I just shrugged and found some old Kong and Godzilla toys on eBay. When her friends who are girls come over she tries to get them to play monsters. They look at her like they have no clue what she's asking. I was a weird kid myself, so my only hope is that I can convey to her that there is nothing wrong with being into things other kids aren't. That it makes her unique and cool and interesting. She's going to be freaking cool when she grows up. My son is obsessed with roller coasters that he runs around the house making whooshing noises and banking at the turns. He's 13. In the law of averages, someone has to be below the average line. My son is weird and I have accepted that he will be the weird kid in school. In fact, you're welcome that you can say at least little Billy isn't like that kid. Roller coaster tycoon man. He'd probably love it. He's not my kid, but my godson is extremely creepy. He likes to stand in his little sister's doorway while she naps and watches her sleep. I ask him why and he says, "It's the closest I can get to seeing her dead." He also likes to shove her fists in his mouth as far as it can go because he wants to know what suffocating is like. Just in case, I'm pretty sure he'd be a serial killer if it wasn't for Mario Kart. He is 8. She is 5. He hasn't done as many creepy things lately. It was mostly right after she was born. He had a hard time adjusting. He still says the odd weird thing here and there, but nothing as bad as what I mentioned above. His offhand comments are much more innocent, such as "I'm going to sell you on Kijiji and I'm going to sell you for a quarter," and ask for change to his sister. Also, his character in Mario Kart is always Yoshi, and although he is unhealthily obsessed with the game, he is an otherwise normal 8-year-old. My youngest daughter, around the age of 4 or 5, used to tell me she was going to chop off my head. Eventually it escalated to, "Daddy, if you do that I'm going to chop off your head and cook it on the BBQ." She's 10 now and will laugh with a fondness in her chuckle that she remembers that and still thinks it's hilarious. We told her that, although we laughed our asses off at hearing this, it really isn't funny and I would prefer to not be decapitated and subsequently cooked on my grill. I'm fairly certain she doesn't want to kill me. Fairly. My kid is a classical musician. We're the village idiots, so I have no idea where this talent came from, but he is known as the weirdo in the family. Don't get me wrong, we're very proud, and there really is nothing quite so moving as listening to the planets live from some major performing arts center. It has been a real education for us. Alas, we really don't fit in when we attend his concerts and we are the weirdos. Nice to see weird being beneficial, interesting as opposed to freaking creepy as it has been in the rest of the thread. Best of luck to him. My kid hid a dead animal. It's escaping me what kind, either bird or squirrel. He kept it there for a long time, till it began to stink up everything. When found I thought, oh crap, am I raising a serial killer? I watched him closely for years. He's fine now, in college, good grades etc. If he's a serial killer I have no idea. If he's a serial killer, he is pretty good at it at least. I hope my kids are good enough serial killers to cover their tracks and not make crap awkward. I come home from work one night to find my darling 2-year-old blonde daughter standing at the top of the stairs staring up at the full moon in her jammies, teddy bear in hand. She should have been in bed by this time. Not wanting to scare her, I walked up the stairs, knelt down next to her and asked her what she was thinking about. I was imagining she would say something childish like, "Is the moon really made of cheese, daddy?" Something cute like that. Instead, she turns to face me with a very serious look in her face and in a very serious and creepy monotone voice says to me, "We are all in the same cage." 2 years old. I nearly died of fright. I literally recoiled from her and ran back down the stairs backwards. I couldn't believe it. She said a few more creepy things like that, but it stopped after a while. Update. That was 12 years ago. She has since turned into a very happy and well-adjusted teenager who is only slightly in league with Satan. Long con. Keep your doors locked. She's coming for you. She's gonna break out of this rusty cage. Collateral damage. Daddy. Not my kid but my niece. A few months ago I read a similar thread and later that night just for fun I asked me brother and his wife if their kids ever did any creepy. They both immediately looked at each other and seemed surprised that I had asked. Apparently the last few couple of weeks they would hear my niece talking to herself in her bedroom. They assumed it was just playful imagination so they didn't give it much thought. One day however my brother asked her who she kept talking to. She said it was her new best friend Satan that visits her at her window every day. Her window is close to the ground so they were seriously concerned that there was someone actually going up to her window and kept a closer eye on her for the next few days. Every single time they would hear her talking he would go outside to her windows but never found anyone. They began asking her more about his new friend and apart from his name being Satan she mentioned hey he follows her everywhere she goes and that he promised her he will bring her a cake one day. At a late cookout at my parents' a week before they mentioned that she took her mom outside to her backyard and pointed at the pitch black backyard and told her that her friend Satan was there and she wanted to meet her also. That made chills run down my spine since I was at that cookout also. After that they made her promise she wouldn't talk to Satan anymore. Haven't checked with my brother how that worked out though. And NBSP. Update. So I got a chance to talk to my brother and not much happened since then. After all of that happened since they know it was not someone actually at her window and to not scare her they kept close attention who she brought up in conversations. A while of not hearing about it my brother and his wife asked her about Satan and she just said she doesn't see him anymore. They haven't heard about him since then. That was about 6 months ago. Now the only friends she talks about are her soccer team friends. BTW, she's 5. I guess my son was weird from conception. He rarely moved and laid transverse the entire pregnancy right up to delivery. After he was born he had to be held all the time. Ended up just getting a sling. He would scream for a good 2 hours every night. For no reason. I always said he was releasing his frustrations. Refused to sleep on his crib as a baby. The only way to get him to sleep was bundled up in his car seat. As he got older he had some quirks that I just chalked up to his personality. Obsessed with cars and would run them back and forth in the dirt for hours. He was a quiet kiddo and played alone for hours. Had to be very careful with movies. If things got sad, like when Bambi's mother died, he would sob for hours. When he started preschool his first week was spent under the table. When he was in kindergarten the teacher started dropping hints. He's an odd yet lovable boy, prefers to be alone, gets upset over odd things. First grade it finally became obvious to me we had issues. The day he walked out of his classroom on his hands and feet to meet me I knew we had something going on. He also wore sweats because jeans were too hard. Had to have cold blankets aka sheets at night to cover up. Spent hours and hours playing with Legos. Socks and underwear were huge problems. Eating was an issue. He'd get stuck on a food and only eat that for weeks. He had no friends and didn't want any. Said other kids bothered him. Had him evaluated and yup, autistic, not Asperger's as he had some serious speech issues. He's now 22, on disability and happily living his life. He still has no friends and doesn't want any. He spends his day playing video games and watching documentaries on Netflix. Just pray he doesn't want to talk to you about it because he will go on for hours and hours and hours. LOL. In a way I'm jealous. I wish I could be so content with my life. He just goes with the flow, as long as things don't change. LOL, he has no wants. Not because he has everything but because he is just content with what he has. He only sees today, has no concept of planning for tomorrow. He totally lives in the moment. The day he walked out of his classroom on his hands and feet to meet me I knew we had something going on. I have Asperger's and until this moment it never occurred to me that this isn't normal kid behavior. When my son was around 2 years old, he was obsessed with the phrase "the ship sinks in the water." He'd said something like "Ako Utawa," for Spanish "El barco se hunde en el agua," while making a gesture with his hand emulating a sinking ship. His hand upside down, bent a little to form a ship, and putting it down slowly. He talked about it constantly, and even asked me for YouTube videos of sinking ships. I used to indulge him to see his reaction, and it was kind of weird to see his glee while looking at those videos. To everyone he met, familiar or unknown people, the first thing he'd said was that phrase. He would come to you randomly, say it, and then he'd go off like nothing. His obsession has moved to Mario Bros nowadays. He also makes comments, since he was little, about his sister who died when he was a baby. He's convinced he knew her, but he never had any siblings. See, reincarnation. My kid is into nature documentaries. Very into nature documentaries. One day, when he was 3 years old, my wife was getting his bath ready. She was bent over the tub, checking the water temperature. My son shoved his face in her butt, took a huge whiff, walked away and said, "Ah, dominant female butt." I have since realized not only is he into nature and its beasts, but he retains almost anything he sees while watching those educational shows. He is also most likely going to be an butt man. Pretty amazing that he made the connection to his mom being the dominant female, though. So when I was like 3 I became like obsessed as frick with Hitler. I think it was because I saw World War II documentaries and Hitler looked like a total badass with the armies and pomp and splendor and whatnot. My parents, wanting to foster my interests in history, bought me the Encyclopedia of the United States at War and read it to me before bedtime. I would have them read to me about Hitler over and over again and then go to class in pre-K and tell the other kids about Hitler. I watched hours and hours of history documentaries because I was obsessed. This fascination also led me to tell my parents that people that were loud at restaurants must be Jewish. My parents were called in for a PTA meeting and they were instructed to stop telling me about Hitler because the other kiddos were starting to like him too. Psychometric fella. Führer of the Fourth Reich at age 4. My father died when I was about 9 years old. Years later, when I had a son, I named him after my father. When my son was 3, he would build elaborate train sets out of the braille train set my father gave to me. I would hear him in his room talking like he was having a conversation. So one day I was in his room asking him about another elaborate train he had built and asked him how he figured it out on his own. He answered, "Oh, I am not alone, I am with my friend Mike." My dad's name and his name. He always helps, and by the way, he says he loves you. I never knew what to say or do when he played with Mike. I guess I just have to believe it was what it was. My son has said that when he kills someone, he'll put their body on the train tracks so no one will know they were murdered. And then he said if anyone saw him, he'd have to put their body on the train tracks too. He was 6. I embrace his dark side. It'll help out a lot in the future zombie invasion. I embrace his dark side. It'll help out a lot in the future zombie invasion. If he doesn't somehow cause it, that is. He's unbelievably interested in bugs of all sorts. In 2nd grade, his class was learning about bugs and their body parts, thorax, abdomen, etc. His test asked him to circle all the pictures of bugs that had mandibles. He got a point off for not circling a mosquito. He went and talked to the teacher and told her that the mosquito has a proboscis, not a mandible. She gave him the point back. It's me. I'm the weird kid who likes bugs. As a entomologist, this is not weird. Nurture this and your son is going to have a pretty cool and good life ahead of him. Out of the blue, my 4-year-old daughter tells my wife, "Mommy, when you die, try to stay asleep. It's easier that way." My kid has been the weird kid since about 2 years old. His favorite bedtime stories were the user manuals to my appliances. At 3, he became obsessed with human biology and would watch open heart surgeries on YouTube. He was also obsessed with vacuums. For 4 years, he would spend hours in department stores demonstrating to shoppers how to use them. At 5, his summer plans was to teach himself mechanical engineering and physics. I could go on. When he turned 3 is when I started to suspect he was different. It scared the frick out of me. He was my firstborn, so I had no idea if he was developing normally or not. His thirst for knowledge became extreme and I didn't understand how to handle him. So at 4 I sent him to a child psychologist. I was terrified my son would have a nervous breakdown, because although he was so young, he never once in his life, played. All he did was learn. The psychologist made it clear to me that he was gifted, but that I had to force him to play. Otherwise he would develop OCD and other disorders. I'm trying to make this short. He is 8 now, and still different, but he does play. Sometimes. I'm happy he is who he is, but I can see that he has a difficult life ahead of him. He doesn't have many friends, mainly because he would rather discuss the news than some new game or toy. I can say this though, I don't think I'll ever meet another human being who is anything like my son, and I love that about him. My wife's son, from a previous relationship, is 12 years old and ever since I've known him, since he was 5, still won't talk in a normal person voice or volume, if that makes any sense. He will talk in all sorts of weird overly animated voices or tones. I ask him to stop talking like that, but I truly don't believe he could if he tried. He is pretty introverted with anxieties we are working on, but that is the weirdest thing. My only reaction to that is it's hard to take anything he says seriously. I have a hard time wanting to have conversations with him because it bothers me that I don't get a solid answer out of him or feel like we could have a real conversation. After working with him for so long to try and remedy it, I feel defeated sometimes. The little boy my granddad took in is really creepy, but no one else sees it but me. He is obsessed with Five Nights at Freddy's and guns. He has so many toy weapons it's worrying. He also likes to tell me in detail how he is going to kill me and my grandma. All he does is sit at the computer and play Minecraft. He makes these really complicated machines to kill NPCs and then he laughs when they die. He also likes to attempt to get into the bathroom when anyone is doing anything in there, so he can watch. It's not any one of these things that make him creepy, it's all of them together. Especially his fascination with talking about and killing fake things. Maybe cut down on visits to grandma's house. Male cousin of mine, 12 years old, asked several of my female relatives and even my girlfriend if he could give them foot massages while we were on vacation. Lake Powell. It got to the point where he was very forward and pressing to give the foot massages and making people say number 3-4 times before moving on to someone else. I'm pretty sure he is on the autism scale, maybe Asperger's. Creepy nonetheless. Probably had a foot fetish and was being weird about it. With love. My daughter has Asperger's and is about to start her second year in middle school. Middle school girls aren't known for their empathy, and while we've worked tirelessly for about 10 years to help her get along socially, it's exhausting for her, and she's probably the weird kid at school. She's got a small number of friends that will hang out with her individually, that is, not during school time, but gets them in a group situation at school and the larger social dynamic of middle school girls kicks in, and she's left out. So yeah, my daughter's the weird kid. She's also loving and funny and an honors student and into anime and Minecraft and theater. Weird kid here. Was adopted by my grandparents in my teens, but they basically raised me. Spent a lot of time there growing up, months upon months, some years. Parents were abusive. I'm bipolar and was pretty obsessed with death, self-mutualization, anything sad, dark or scary. They never addressed it outright but took ample time to assure me that I was loved, had support, and sent me along to do tasks on the farm that I hated but later appreciated. Many times I came home drunk or high and they would just ask if everything was alright. I'd say yes, stumble into my room and write. The next morning was always greeted with a hug, an attempt to feed me breakfast, and a task to do. Be homework, actual work, or a soft suggestion to see friends. Looking back, what they did wouldn't have worked with a lot of other kids. Never would have sobered up act, but they really knew me better than I did. Though after listening to Manson a bit too loud, they introduced me to polka music. Still don't enjoy it, but it always makes me smile. I really love this. It's like they wanted you to make mistakes and learn on your own but still reassure you that they loved you. Coming from someone also basically raised by grandparents. Grandparents are seriously the best. Mine liked polka music too. My youngest son is pretty weird. Creative, funny, smart, but weird. Last year he was upset because it made him feel isolated. He has friends but he knows his mind works different from theirs. He isn't on the spectrum. He just makes intuitive leaps and mentally connects information in a way that isn't traditional. I reacted by crawling into his bunk bed with him and cuddling him. I held my 8-year-old and told him that being weird is okay. I told him that I was pretty weird myself and that while it meant that you wouldn't connect with everyone, the people you do find as friends are going to be true and amazing friends. I told him that being normal was boring, and if anyone ever teased him for being different, then frick those kids, because it isn't like these other people he is going to be hanging out with in 20 years. Then we arranged for some counseling so he could talk to a professional about it and be reassured that no one is as normal as they seem. Not a parent but a friend of mine is extremely weird, and I wonder myself how his parents react. He has several weird tendencies. He absolutely refuses to get a smartphone. He has an old Nokia, and even after we tell him eventually there will only be smartphones, he counters this by purchasing 100 of these phones on eBay just in case. He has no problem having one of us look stuff up on our smartphones though. He hates condiments and meat on sandwiches. When he goes to a deli he gets just bread and cheese, nothing else. He is terrified of alcohol. Once someone put vodka in a drink of his. He took one sip and had to go to therapy. I forgot he also still sleeps with one of those safety bars on a bed to prevent you from falling. He's 27. He's a good friend, just very different. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.